mutilated. It's not even, damage is a quiet word for the mutilation of a child's spirit. We cannot take a 7 or 8-year-old and think that 7 or 8-year-old has the same sexual needs and drives and concepts as you and I. We have to realize that children see things differently, use material differently, and have different ways of integrating experience. Children cannot integrate anal sodomy at 8 or 9.
The fact is, it's all they know how to do. It's all they're good at. I came to know very well a 22-year-old hustler masquerading as a 16-year-old for whom friends and I were able to find a job. But it wasn't a good enough job for him. He knew the risks. Over the years, although he was white and blonde, he had to do more and more and more for less and less and less, turn more and more tricks a day.
As he got older?
As he got older. One of the things that I know happened to him in the last year was that he had to be subjected to penetration with bottles, and the men played the game of whether or not they'd break the bottle off in him or not and cut him. That kind of thing. When he was 17, he didn't have to do that, and he got more money. At 22, he pretended he was 16, the man pretended he was 16, he got less money, he had to turn more tricks, but he didn't know what else to do. He felt it was the one thing he was good at. He also admitted to being miserable.
What are some of the legal problems here? How come more of, the organization that's exploiting these boys hasn't been uncovered, and two, the men who are participating in these crimes against each other?
Well, take the boys' homes, for instance. In the case in San Antonio, which is still pending, there was an eyewitness who walked into the room of the director of the home at 4 in the morning because he was sure there would be a little boy in there. And there was a 6-year-old boy in bed with this supposed priest. Now, the eyewitness testimony that a boy was in bed with an old man doesn't do anything in the courtroom. It doesn't prove that there was sex going on. If the little boy testifies, who is going to take the word of a little boy against the word of, say, a real priest?
And what little boy is going to say that a priest
violated him? It's a hard arrest to make. It's hard to get a warrant. It's hard to get an arrest. It's hard to get a conviction. And then it's hard to get a real sentence. Very hard. Nobody wants to put anybody away on this kind of charge because the evidence is, by its nature, very, very shaky.
And very controversial as well, and that just points to another facet of this problem, is that often it's just ignored, preferentially ignored by the courts and by the police and by society because they just don't want to believe it's happening. I remember when we did our reports, we thought it significant enough because of the nature of the case involved some Austin personnel and citizens that we put it on the front page because I was shocked personally by it. And when we printed these stories, we just were barraged with letters from people saying, basically, I don't want to read this kind of stuff over my morning coffee. You know, even though it happened, even though we documented it, and we'd gone out of our way to make sure that it was all backed up with fact, people just refused to want us, not only to believe it, but to even believe that it happens. So that's part of the problem. And another part of the problem is, of course, we were shocked when we found out the extent and broad nature of this problem of pederasty and what all it involves. But we were truly shocked when we found out initially when we started this a few years back, that the police department didn't even know what pederasty was. I mean, I won't say the police department, but I know that I was dealing with one officer in sex crimes division who's no longer in sex crimes division. And I was trying to do my part for truth and justice and trying to get to the root of the problem. And I said, well, tell me about your case history of pederasty. And he just went blank. He had no idea what I was talking about. Now, to their credit, I will say that the Austin Police Sex Crimes Division has come a long way since then. But if the police don't know what it is, then certainly most members of society won't know what it is. So when they see it in the papers, and editors don't know what it is, so they're not going to print it in the first place, but occasionally when it does go through, society just writes it off as an aberration, a very,
well, how are the police organized? You mentioned sex crime division, but
they have a sex crimes division.
There's also the vice squad. So
the sex crimes division is a subset of vice.
No, it's part of homicide in almost every city.
Oh, is it?
It's part of homicide. Vice has to do with pornography, obscenity, prostitution, things involving consenting adults, which may be crimes if they're performed in public or commercially. A sex crime is something that involves a direct violation of the law or involves things with kids or child pornography.
Do you have a feel for, say, the budget and the number of personnel in vice squads compared to sex crime divisions in various places?
No, I really don't, Frank. It's something I ought to know more about.
In other words, the emphasis the police department places on one.
I do in Austin, at that time anyway. At that time they had 3 people in the entire sex crimes division, and they were so overworked with just, that's when the choker rapist was around and what have you, and I mean that pretty much exhausts their time. And they were concerned about the issue, but they just said, frankly, we're not staffed, we don't have the personnel to do it.
Rape is a major crime. The incidence is high. Attempted rape is common. It's extremely hard to track down a rapist. These guys are working extremely hard, and then we charge them with the duty of cleaning up the streets. And in Austin, the streets are clean. In Houston, they're not. But how can they go behind the walls and find out what's going on indoors? That's extremely hard to do.
Has there been much investigation by any police or the FBI or the judicial system of this phenomenon? Or is it that it's a fairly recent phenomenon, or is it just something that they haven't dealt with historically or currently?
There have been legislative investigations. There was a national investigation a couple of years ago looking toward the goal of national legislation to protect kids. But no, there hasn't been much.
There are some who would like to tell us that the problem does not exist, that to say Houston is a major center for boy prostitution is to overstate the case. That is what the Houston police tell us.
There again, it's not, we don't have as many male prostitutes as we do female prostitutes, but when you start talking about juvenile boys, 14, 15, 16 years old, 2 or 3 cases are too many, and we do have a few of those.
Well, how would you, talking about that a little further, how would you define the problem of young boy prostitution in Houston as far as the size of the problem?
Well, I'm not going to say it's one of the major problems of our city. Again, we have a certain amount of it, and it's our intention to try to keep the lid on it, to keep it from getting anywhere.
Listen to Atlanta Police sex crimes detective Douglas McCoy, a 10-year veteran.
It is almost, at this point, especially at this time of the year, almost an epidemic.
Yet only a very few young boys are ever arrested.
In 1978, there were 7. So far in 1979, we've had 3 male prostitution charges.
The facts are the Atlanta Police Department is understaffed. Vice and sex crime detectives carry a heavy workload. Rapes, for example, are up almost 100% this year. Boy prostitution is near the bottom on the priority list.
Local police have to change their attitudes towards the boys, thinking of them more as victims than as criminals. The change in philosophy has worked for the Los Angeles Police Department and serves as an example for other cities.
When you've got a 15-year-old boy out on the street selling his body, you've got to understand why he's out there. It's usually due to a poor home life. He's there to obtain the necessities of life. And you've got to look at that boy as a victim. Even though he's out there committing the crime of prostitution, you still have to look at him as a victim and why he's out there.